Hello everyone, and welcome to today's tutorial where we will be making a hex tile map generator just like this one, where you can define your height and width of the hexagons and fit the spacing in with the code as well. So without any more to go on that, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to delete this. You won't need to do this. You will have an empty scene. If you're starting up, if you don't, just start a new scene. You only have your camera and your directional lighting, and that's all you want. From here we're going to create a new empty. We're going to right click on that and rename it to tile generator, and on the tile generator over here we're just going to create a new hex tile map generator. I've already wrote that in. Just type in here, I'll just do it anyways, hex tile map generator, and then set that as a new script, create and add. Just make sure it's in C# as well, which I believe it will be as default. From here we're going to open up this file in our Visual Studio. There we are, and we are going to start coding this out. Just put it from the screen one moment. Yeah. I'm just going to tidy up this here a little bit. There's a few things we won't be using. This. Inside of here, we are going to obviously put the code for the generation of the hexagon tile map. And we will need integer values to determine the width of the map and the height of it. So I'm just making an int there called map width. I'm making another one below, int map height. I'm going to give that a value of 12, say. We are also going to need an object to instantiate a hexagon. To do that, we're going to need I believe you'd be able to get them from the internet, from somewhere, but more reliably I would suggest that you download Blender. It's a free to use software program that you can create 3D objects in, models, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to be using Blender to do this. So inside of Blender, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on the camera here. I'm just going to delete it, as I don't want it brought into Unity. Same with the light, click on that and delete it. The camera here, sorry, the cube. I'm just going to set my selection to cursor to selected by holding Shift and S and selecting cursor to selected. It doesn't really matter. Well, I don't think it will anyways, but just do it just to be safe. With the cube selected with right click, I'm going to click delete and delete that actual cube. I'm going to hold Shift, press A, and under mesh we're going to create a cylinder. Don't click on anything else once you've done that. What we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a hexagon by going to the vertices here and changing that value to 6, which will give us the hexagon. Just before we have a look at that, I'm just going to go into the depth as well, which is just below where the vertices was, and set that to 0.01, so it is quite thin. And now we have that, we have the hexagon, which we will use in the in Unity to be our tiles essentially. So from here you'll want to click File, Save As. Pick where you want to save it to. I just saved one on my desktop as I already had one there. Just save it out, give it whatever name you want, just make sure you know where it is. From here I'm going to close down Blender. Yep. With the file saved on my desktop, I'm just going to slide my things to the side here, and as you can see I have the hexagon here. You can just go into Assets, Import Asset, and then import it through wherever it is that you've saved it, but I just tend to put them on my desktop and just flat out drag them into your asset window at the bottom. Then it will bring in our hexagon for us. There we are, that we can use in the script as an actual tile prefab. If I just grab this model here and bring it into the window, go down to it, as you can see, I'll just go into the game view here, it is on its side. We don't want that, we want it to be flat on the floor. So I'm just going to grab this, I'm going to rotate it on its X by 90 so that it is nice and flat. I'm also going to grab this and bring it back into the asset window at the bottom, so that it's a separate prefab. We don't want to be using the model, we're just going to use this one right here. I'm going to also set these scale values to a nice rounded value of 1 and 0.02 on that, as it seems to be quite happy with that. So just make sure your values are the same here as what I have. I'm not going to reset that, we'll set the position to 0 as well. It probably doesn't make any difference, I just like to keep everything organized in that way. So from here we will need to use this as the tile in the script. So we're going to open up that script again, and at the top we are going to create a public game object, and we are going to call it the hex tile prefab. Just close that off and give it a save. Head back into Unity, and in this script on the tile generator, we will get this little slot pop up for the hex tile prefab. Just drag the second hexagon in, not the one with the little square. You don't want that one. You want to drag the other one in to there, and then now this knows what hexagon it's using to instantiate in the future. Also, while you're at it, in the hierarchy here on the left is a hexagon there. Just delete that one out. Don't delete the model in the assets, leave that, and this one, you'll need them both. Just delete it from the hierarchy at the left. So now we have that in the script. The script knows what it is. We're going to go back into the code, and we are going to start coding out the functionality of the actual generation. I'm going to do that in its own separate function. I'm not going to do it in start, so I'm going to create a new method here called create hex tile map. It won't have any parameters fed into it, and just in the update I'm going to change the update itself to the create hex tile map function. And inside of here we are going to need to go through all of the width positions and all of the height positions, and we're going to use for loops to do that. So we're going to type in for int x equals 0, x is less than or equal to map width x plus plus. And we're also going to need to go through, for every x position we're going through, we're going to go through the z positions as well. Tidy that up there. We're going to need a second for loop inside of here, and this is going to use int z equals 0, z equal to or less than map height, z plus plus. And inside of here, for each of the positions that these loops are going through, we're going to want to create a tile. So we're going to create a temporary game object. So game object temp go, and we're going to make this equal to instantiate. Instantiate. There we are. We're going to instantiate the hex tile prefab. Hex tile prefab. There we are. And that'll just spawn the tiles on one spot, I do believe. So if we go in here, we'll get a load of hex tiles spawn when we click play for every body that we'd put in the code, the 25 and the 12, I think. There, as you can see, there's a bazillion hex just spawned there. So we have the hexes, but they're obviously not in the right place. So we'll stop playing that, head back into the code, and from here we're going to want to put in some code to work out the positions of the tiles. The issue is that the tiles, when I go back in and press play here, when we spawn them, I'm just going to imagine there's only two tiles here. We are going to want the tiles to be moved up a certain value and then offset to the right a bit, so that they will sit with a nice little gap between them. The code will just rinse and repeat that, keep doing that, so we get the hex tile like effect. So in the code to do that, what we're going to do is do a little bit of math inside of an if check. It's going to be a check to see if the row is even, essentially, and obviously the row that we need to check are the vertical rows. So we're going to check to see if is modulus of 2, equal to 0 if it's modulus by 2, which will basically mean that if it's an odd and you divide it by 2, it's never going to come back as 0, whereas any even number would. So using this, we will know that we're always going to get every second row to be offset by a certain amount, which is exactly what we want to place the tiles. So inside of that, we are going to get the temp geo. I'm just going to quickly go back to the top here and rename this to a big O there, just by right clicking and rename, just to keep the convention up. We're going to get the temp geo transform dot position, and we are going to change that to be equal to a new vector 3, and in here we are going to want it to be equal to x. multiplied by a value that we have set to be the spacing that we want. I happen to know that the value that I'm going to need in this situation is it's going to be a float. It's going to be called tile x offset, and it's going to be equal to the value of 1.8. I happen to know that these tiles that come through with Blender, that value works quite nice. You could make this public just by putting a public at the front, and generate, like every time you press play, once the rest of the code's in, it'll move the tiles around for you. But you can also just ballpark the if you round off the position of the original of the generator itself. I'll just round off its position there. Press play. Up. No, I won't, because we have code in here that is trying to run. I'll just quickly comment that out just to show you this. We'll head back in. I'm going to press play. If you have got your hexagon from somewhere else, what you can do is just come into scene view here, and as you can see, the hexagon itself will be at 0. What you want to do is move this hexagon up to the desired value you want, and then over. Just ballpark it over, just like that, and you will get a value just up here that you can put in that will give you close to what you want. Don't know if it's 1.8 that I was using in the other script. I'll give it a try and see what it looks like. But you can just ballpark them, and what you can do is for your height value, the tile Z offset, you would set that to the Z, and the X offset would be set to this. I don't want that spacing. I already know what spacing I want, so I'm just going to fill them in with the numbers I have. But if you've got yours from elsewhere, feel free to just do that and then write it in. I'm just going to come back into the code, and just below the X offset I'm going to create the tile Z offset as well, so that we can use that, and that's 1.565, very specific indeed, but I happen to like that. So back down into the if call here, check, sorry, that we're checking to see the if it works out as a 0, if it's a second row basically, and we're changing the position. I'm going to multiply the X by tile X offset. As I said, I already know that value is quite nice, so I'm happy with that. We're going to give it a 0 on the Y, and for the Z, we're going to do Z multiplied by tile Z offset. And what that'll do is for every second row, it'll adjust the positions. So I'll just quickly go back into Unity, press play, and we should get every second row that is correctly positioned there. As we can see, that has worked. You can already see that there is space between these for the other tiles, but they haven't been given the code yet, as only 50% of them are being put in place. So I'll stop that from playing, head back into the code, and just below the if here we're going to put an else in. We don't need to put an else if here because there's only 2 possible outcomes that we need to be aware of. And in this else we are going to get the temp geo dot transform dot position, just like above, set that equal to a new vector 3, and we're going to do pretty much the same in there, just with a slight difference to the X positioning, because we need to move it along a little bit more than it needs to be initially moved along by half a tile, I do believe. So what we'll do for that is we'll get X multiplied by tile X offset, and we're going to add to that tile X offset divided by 2, and that will give us the spacing on the X for every other row to be correct. We're going to also give it a 0 on the Y, as we don't want that to change, and for the Z we're going to do the same as above, Z times tile offset Z. And that there should make our tile map. I'm just going to quickly make these floats up here serializable. Sorry, the ints, not the floats, so that I can change them in the inspector, so we can change the size of the map. You could just make them public, but I like to try to keep things private. I'm going to head back into Unity, and on a tile generator, the width and height should pop up. And I'm just going to quickly change these. I'm going to give that a value of 13 and a map height of 8. I'm going to press play, and we should have correctly positioned tiles. There we are. So that is the hex tile map. It's quite simple. There's not much code to it. You can obviously make these pretty large, 70 and 45. You could make it much bigger. It just It's not an issue. It's just for demonstration purposes. No real need for me to make stupidly outlandish sizes. But as you can see, the spacing there is quite nice. It's a uniform. It looks correct. But just before I finish this, I would also like to go back into the code and just quickly set away. I'll go back to you and just quickly demonstrate this. I would like to set the tiles to not just clutter up the hierarchy like this. I'd like some organization to it. I'm going to go back into the code, and we're going to create a new function at the bottom here called void set tile info, and we are going to call that after we have created the game object. Whichever else, if or else we go for here, we are going to call that function so that we can set the information of the tile we've just created and set its position. So set tile info, we are going to pass it the temp geo. That's it there. We're going to send it x and we're going to send it z. We'll obviously need to go down to the method here and tell it that we are going to be taking in these. So game object geo, we're going to have int x and int z. So using this in here, we're just going to do a few quick calls just to set the geo equal. Sorry, the geo's transform its parent. So geo transform parent to be equal to transform, which is the transform that this script is sitting on, which, as we know, was the empty game object tile manager. And just below that, we're going to change the name of the geo by typing in geo.name. We're going to make that equal to x.toString. And we're going to add on, not by that, we're going to add that on, and in quotation marks we're going to put a little space in between the x and the next value, which is going to be z.toString, just like the x beforehand. And make sure you add a little plus here as well, so that it adds these to the strings. And from there, if we head back into Unity and press play, we should see all of the hexagons parented to the tile generator, and their positions will be declared by numbers. If I just go into the scene here, as you can see, if I press 0, 0, this is our very bottom left tile. 0, 1. The second value is the height, and the first value is the position along the side, the width, I suppose. So if I click this one here, it will show up as this one right there. So we have control over the organization of the tiles and the role being placed, and I think it's just a nice way to have it because we can see where you are on the map. But apart from that, that is everything in this tutorial. I hope someone finds this useful, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.